This is the DiPietro, Canty, and Rothenberg podcast.
I'm a big star, you know.
Listen live weekday mornings from 5 to 8 a.m. on 98.7 ESPN in New York, the ESPN app, the TuneIn app, or on your smart speaker.
Hey, Alexa, play ESPN New York 98.7.
We've been talking, look, it's September, right?
It is September.
Football is right around the corner. We focused on the Cam Newton stuff yesterday. Some Jets and Giants stuff as well, and it's time for some Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Where do you think Cam Newton winds up, Chris, now that he's been cut loose? And I guess you could – I don't think that this was the intent, but I do think that Bill Belichick might have done Cam a solid where he's not going to want to be a backup. If Mac Jones is getting the job right out of camp, unless something goes sideways with a rookie quarterback, he's not going to get a chance to play there. So where do you think he winds up going for his next stop?
I think it's going to be to be determined, G. And I say that because obviously Cam wants an opportunity to continue his career as a starter. I think he's going to have to wait until a team is dealing with an injury at the quarterback spot or a team's quarterback is unavailable before he ends up catching on and getting a job. Like, to me, that would be the surest path for him to being a starter. So we might be talking about Cam Newton not having a job in the NFL for the next few weeks. But even when that opportunity presents itself, G, I mean, he's still going to run into the same issue that he had in New England as far as COVID is concerned, because he's made the decision not to be vaccinated. Like, a team has to decide, do we want to bring this guy in and, potentially – put players in our locker room at risk because this guy's unvaccinated. I mean, for a backup quarterback, I mean, that's the part of it that teams have to be worried about. So I do think it's going to be interesting to see where Cam Newton ends up, but I don't think he's going to sign with the team in the next couple of weeks before the season kicks off. I just don't see that.
Yeah, and if he ever wanted motivation to get I mean, it's too late now, but if he would have told him it's either you get vaccinated or you're going to go play with the Houston Texans, I would think that if anything was going to convince somebody to go get vaccinated, avoiding that Texans situation probably would be it.
Yeah, I mean, with that team and that offensive line, no quarterback wants to sign up to play behind that. Dear God.
Yeah,
the Texans are going to be awful.
they are going to be awful. It's kind of hard to envision a scenario where they're not going to be. But
yeah, you hate for Cam Newton to have his career and his job decided by something like this. I mean, losing this quarterback competition. I mean, this is tough for him. Because, I mean, I will say this, G, he did look good in the preseason. It's not like Cam played poorly in the preseason. I just think Mac Jones played that much better. And then when you couple the concerns of COVID and him not being vaccinated and having to deal with all the additional protocols that have to be in place when you have a player like that on your team, like it feels like it got to the point where the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. And as far as Bill Belichick and his level of trust that he has with his quarterback, it's clear that he has more with Mac Jones than he does with Cam Newton.
Well, I'm sure that whenever Bill Belichick does talk about it and speak about it, the issue of the vaccination
don't hold your breath
stuff,
with that one.
Yeah, he won't to walk down that alley and give you all that much information. That's not really his thing. But of course, Urban Meyer, he already has done that because he admitted yesterday that players' vaccination status did play a role in the Jaguars roster cuts. Now, the NFLPA has opened an investigation into that because the agreement that they made, the union and the league, that would not have a role in players being cut. But I would just simply say, Chris, why wouldn't it have a role in players being cut? Like, why would they make that agreement back when they did earlier this year? Because, like, if you have a player who's more likely to miss time, let's say, because of injury, that's clearly everything goes into it. So why would there be an agreement that this would not play a role?
Well, I mean, listen, I don't know why they would make that stipulation, but as somebody that spent over a decade in the NFL, I can tell you, teams, if they think a guy is not going to be available for whatever reason, whether it's legal trouble, whether it's injuries, whether it's something like COVID, like if they think a guy is not going to be out there playing and contributing to their team's success, then they're not going to have that guy around. Like, that's just what it is. So as a player, you have to know that. You have to understand that and do everything that you possibly can do to make sure that you're healthy and available for your team, including getting the vaccine. I mean, last year was different because we didn't have the vaccine available to us. We didn't have any real weapons to fight COVID outside of the masks and the protocols that they have in place. But that's not the case now. That's not the situation. That's not the hand that the NFL has been dealt. Like, we actually have a vaccine. We have a better way of mitigation. And so for players to choose not to use the tools that we have available to us to stop the spread of COVID, like, that's one of those things that teams look at and say, that puts us at a competitive disadvantage. So, yeah, it's absolutely going to factor into teams' plans and how they shape their roster. So if a player around the NFL is surprised that the New England Patriots or any other team would include, vaccinations as a part of their evaluation and their determination on who gets a job, then shame on that player. You should know better.
And Urban Meyer, I know it's not been long, but the amount of missteps that he has even had in his short time as the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. If you were building a bonfire, this would be another log you could throw on the fire, and you'd be able to see that. You'd be able to see that bonfire from an airplane above, because it seems like every couple of weeks there's some sort of thing that happens there, and it makes you kind of question. I know we haven't played any games yet, but it does kind of make you question whether or not that was the right hire at the time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, listen, I'm sure that they're having a little bit of buyer's remorse down there in Jacksonville in terms of who they actually hired to lead their franchise and to develop Trevor Lawrence. Like, the whole Urban Meyer experiment, I don't think it's going to last long. We'll see here shortly on what this team ends up being this year, but I don't have high expectations for them. Like, I don't think they're going to accomplish much, and it's unfortunate because Trevor Lawrence is one of those players that we've been looking forward to seeing, for the last 3 years, and it just feels like they're not putting the kid in a position to get his NFL career off to the best of starts. But with Urban Meyer coming out and saying what he said yesterday, I just don't understand why he had to say that out loud. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's something that everybody behind the scenes understands. It's something that everybody knows will factor into teams' decisions on whether or not they're going to cut guys. But why even come out and say it? Like, that part of it, because it's such a boneheaded decision.
Yeah, you don't realize that you can't say that, right? Like, it's just an obvious misstep, because I'm sure in college it would not be an issue. He could say whatever he wants. He's running the show, and he probably doesn't realize that there are things that should be left unsaid. Here's Urban Meyer yesterday when asked about whether or not vaccination came into play when it came to making those final cuts.
Could you share with us whether a vaccinated versus unvaccinated player had an impact on a roster decision?
Everyone was considered. That was part of the production. Let's start talking about this, and then also, is he vaccinated or not? Can I say that was a decision maker? It was certainly in consideration.
Yeah, so he just walked right into that.
Why confirm it? Why? Just let people speculate. You don't have to tell them this is what we're doing. You don't have to tell them that. This is something that was completely unnecessary. This is a self-inflicted wound. That's what this is. Like, there was no reason for Urban Meyer to come out and confirm the suspicions of members of the media about the team making certain decisions when it comes to players and COVID. Like, you don't have to do it. Like, you have to have some level of awareness, first of all, that the NFL and the NFLPA came to some form of agreement about that not being a factor in determining who gets jobs, but then also understanding where we're at as a country. Like it or not, being vaccinated has become a controversial topic. So as a head coach, why would you even touch that when somebody asks you about that? It can only end bad for you. This is one of those things. This is one of those times where keeping it real goes wrong.
Yeah, well, Chris, like tennis fans like myself, you know me, I'm the huge tennis fan. That's an unforced error, right? That's the term that we use among tennis fans that he certainly had. And look, it's a bad thing for the organization. There has to be somebody within the organization before he goes out there and speaks to kind of walk him through something that he clearly should avoid. And that didn't happen.
Are you surprised that the Jacksonville Jaguars
no, not really.
would have this kind of misstep?
No, not really.
No, not at all.
All right, that's some Straight Talk brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. No contract, no compromise. Let's hit on the Giants a little bit.
All right.
Any surprises there in terms of cut downs? You know, Sam Beal makes the team. The running back was Clement. He gets cut. Maybe a sign that Saquon might be a little bit closer to being ready. Anything that jumped out to you from the Giants cut down?
No, nothing really surprising about it. They did make the trade, another trade for an offensive lineman yesterday, bringing over Ben Bredesen. So we'll see what happens with that. I think he's another depth guy. But, I mean, the biggest thing with the Giants is just making sure that offense is much better than it was last year. And based on what we saw from the offensive line in that dress rehearsal game against the New England Patriots, like I have some serious concerns about this team. And clearly the organization has some serious concerns about the offense because they've made trades in back-to-back days to try to bolster a unit that looked overwhelmed by the New England Patriots front seven. So I don't – I like the skill position players that the Giants have. I'm excited about Saquon being back, but I don't know how much of a difference all of those things are going to make if your offensive line isn't significantly better than what we saw this past Sunday.
The Jets make a deal yesterday. Chris Herndon, who for a short while looked like he might have been a piece moving forward, just never seemed to get on the same page as the team. He goes to Minnesota. Jets get back a fourth round pick there.
That's a little bit of a surprise, though.
Yeah. Do you think that Herndon now is going to go someplace and they're all of a sudden going to be able to untap this potential, or do you think this is essentially the last time we'll hear the name Chris Herndon?
I mean, listen, the Vikings clearly think that they're going to be able to tap into his potential. I mean, giving up a fourth-round pick for a guy that was probably going to be cut, I mean, that's –
significant,
that's not nothing, G. That's not nothing. So, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if Chris Herndon was able to turn his career around just because I know how dysfunctional the Jets have been the past 3 or 4 years. So, I mean, it wouldn't shock me to see him go to an offense like that and have his potential unlocked. Because think about it. They got Dalvin Cook. They got Adam Thielen. They got Justin Jefferson. They rebuilt their offensive line. Like that Minnesota Vikings team is not short on weapons. I mean, you're talking about a really, really explosive offense last year. I want to say they were a top 5 offense last year, G. I mean, so to see Chris Herndon in that mix, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if he was able to be a productive player. But, I mean, I think the more significant thing is that the Jets continue to add to their draft capital. Like being able to add another adding a fourth-round pick. Like, I mean, that's going to put them in good position once they get past this season. They evaluate what they've got in year one of their program building with Rob Saleh and seeing what Zach Wilson ends up being. I mean, having all of those draft picks is going to put this team in position to springboard. Now, the biggest thing with the Jets is making sure you answer the question of whether or not you got a franchise quarterback. The early returns on Zach Wilson have been great, but now when the games count for real, like we get to have a true evaluation of him. And if at the end of this season you can answer that question definitively that the Jets have a franchise quarterback, they're going to be in great position going into the 2022 offseason.
Yeah, and as for Herndon, maybe the best thing he has going for him going to Minnesota is the list of players who have left Adam Gase and all of a sudden found themselves or refound themselves or had a career after that where it didn't look like that was going to happen. Herndon just never, the last couple of years, just never seemed to click. But there was a lot of guys on the Jets.
Right.
It did not seem like they ever clicked under Adam Gase.
Yeah.
Right.
Thanks for listening to the DiPietro, Canty, and Rothenberg podcast.
You're absolutely right.
Catch the show on demand wherever and whenever you want. Just subscribe to us, rate us, and review us wherever you get your podcasts.
Obviously, we led the show with it. Time to get back into a little Mets action because the Mets go out yesterday and, as Gary Cohen said, turn those thumbs upside down or flip the thumbs or whatever he said as the Mets go out, come back from 5-1 down in the ninth inning, beat the Marlins for the first win, and then go out and win game number 2. So it seems like, Chris, after all the talk, after all the opinions given, all of a sudden the Mets win a couple of games, Baez and Lindor are factors in both, and it almost seems like all's forgiven.
Well, winning is the ultimate deodorant. And yesterday the Mets went out there and won 2 games. Now, granted, it was against the Miami Marlins, and ultimately it's not going to amount to much because the Mets aren't going to go to the playoffs. But it does get the fans and the media off their backs a little bit, right? Because if Javi Baez and Francisco Lindor go out there and they stink up the joint and the team ends up losing those games, then it's just going to add fuel to the fire based on the controversy that happened a couple of days ago with Javi Baez said in that Zoom press conference. But, I mean, they did go out there and win the game, and Javi Baez was a big part of the team winning the game, scored the winning run, was able to get in there with that head-first slide after Alfaro bobbles the ball in left field. And so that was a big moment. I mean, as far as the team is concerned, it takes the focus off of the gesture and it puts it back on what's happening on the field. And for the final month of the season, even though this team is going nowhere fast, at least they're going to have the opportunity to just kind of lock in on baseball and not have to worry about all the other chatter that's around them.
Yeah, and it just yesterday I thought was the perfect example. It just shows you how fickle fans, not just Met fans, all fans are, because there were not many fans at either game. Let's put it that. Certainly not the first game.
No,
I mean, they could have shot cannonballs into the upper deck, and nobody would have even come close to getting hurt. So when you see at the beginning of the game, when Lindor comes up for the first time, or Baez finally gets an at-bat, fans, doing the thumbs down, and booing and all this, they were the exact same people cheering when Baez scored the winning run, and we know that because there were 13 people in the building yesterday. So we don't have to worry.
This, G. I will say it. It was exciting being able to watch that game unfold the way that it did.
Fantastic finish.
Yeah, like when Brandon Nimmo hit that 2-run home run, I mean, and Dom Smith gets a base hit, you can kind of feel the momentum going with the Mets. And then, of course, Javi Baez would be the one that would come up in a big spot, and he was able to come through. I mean, that was exciting to see. Like, I was just like, for as boneheaded a move that Javi Baez had a couple of days ago when he said what he said at that press conference, like that was an outstanding play by him. I mean, the guy was hustling. He was absolutely on his horse, and he took advantage of a miscue from the Marlins defense, and he ends up being able to score the winning run from his team for his team. It's one of those things, like it's almost like a redemption moment for him, even though he's not going to be with this team, with this franchise beyond this month. It's just one of those things that was kind of cool to see, right? It's one of those sports storylines that kind of came to life just because, it's been so bad for them the last 48 hours to be able to come through for your team in that spot with that much controversy around you. I just think it was a cool story.
Yeah, no question. And it did kind of feel like you could see it coming, right? Like when Nimmo hits the home run to make it 5-3, and then you see the guys that are coming up. And look, I don't think that this win is going to have anything down the road, but for the guys who have primarily been struggling as much as they have, Conforto had a big hit there. Lindor was part of it.
Pete Alonso had the double.
Pete Alonso. And then for Baez, who's been in the center of the storm here, to score the winning run, obviously that was a nice way to kind of put a capper on this story here. And not that it's, I don't know that it necessarily goes away completely, but it's not going to be nearly the focus. If the Mets had gone out and lost those games yesterday, not that we're going to continue to hammer on it because the Mets are kind of a dead team, but that story would have
we'll
continued
continue to hammer on it. We'll continue. Well, listen, we're not above
maybe not to the level that we have here the last 2 days, but yeah, I mean, if you were trying to remove whatever possible sting you could from this story, you have Baez and Lindor apologizing the way that they did yesterday. Lindor saying, if you were offended by us telling the fans to go scratch, I never meant to offend you by doing that. So he went down that road, but the most important thing is you win a couple of games, and we'll see if that takes some of the look, it showed you yesterday that for all of us being offended for Met fans, how dare they treat Met fans this way? Didn't seem like Met fans had that much of a problem, because as soon as they won a game against the Marlins, a completely meaningless game, granted in exciting fashion, Met fans were all back on board, so it's all over.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, how much outrage can we have if the Mets fans aren't outraged?
Right.
I mean, listen, if they're willing to forgive Javi Baez and Francisco Lindor and Kevin Pillar, then God bless them. I think it does make it a little bit easier for them, a little more palatable when the guys come out before the games and kind of do a mea culpa. Even though it felt like it was half-hearted, it was them saying they apologized for what was said and that they didn't mean to disrespect the fans because the fans do pay their salaries. Just that acknowledgement kind of opened the door for fans to kind of look past what they said 48 hours ago. But then when you have a win in the fashion that the Mets did in that first game, like that allows the fans to actually get back to cheering for their team, which is really what they ultimately want to do anyway, right? Like, Absolutely. They don't want to boo their team. A lot of these fans, they've been fans before Javi Baez and Francisco Lindor got here, and they'll be fans when those guys are long gone. So they don't want to boo their team. But when you say things like what Baez said, and when you have the thumbs down gesture, and Lindor's in on it, a guy that they just paid $340 million, it doesn't make you feel good as a fan. But what does make you feel good is having an exciting win like they did yesterday.
Yeah, no question. 1-800-919-ESPN is the telephone number, and the one thing that I will take a little of exception to and look, it's a broadcast, it's a Met broadcast, so they're going to try to make you, they're not going to tell you, you know what, the season's already over, it doesn't really matter. But to think that win, as exciting as it was, as fun as it was, now, well, you know what, you never know. Weird how still a lot of baseball left to play.
That's not
that much
happen.
Baseball.
No.
6 out, 30 to go, playoff odds at 6%, and the Mets aren't a good team, right? Like, despite playing in the worst division in the sport, they're still an under 500 team, so it's nice that they're getting some wins against the Marlins now, but it would have been more helpful if they had gotten some wins against the Marlins earlier on in the season, too.
Or maybe don't go 2-11 in that 13-game stretch with the Giants and the Dodgers. Maybe just don't do that. Like, I mean, that would have been nice, too. But, I mean, I think the time has passed for the Mets to be able to, make some kind of move and to get back into the race. I just don't see that happening in the month of September. But, I mean, I guess – I don't know. I have a hard time, as you do, Gordon, with seeing how this win could potentially springboard them into trying to make a run for the postseason. Like, I just don't see that from this team. I mean, we got enough of a sample size. We're in the month of September, and you're still talking about a below 500 baseball team. Yeah. They're not a good team. So, I mean, that's what it is. They had an opportunity earlier in this season. They led the division for 3 months. And then they gave it all away in the last 5 or 6 weeks, and they're not going to be able to get it back. So that's just the reality of what the 2021 Mets are going to be. And so right now I think the focus has to shift to trying to evaluate all the players on this roster and figuring out who's going to be a part of the long-term future and who are going to be the guys that you're moving on from this offseason.
Well, you never know. I mean, maybe, like, for the people who are saying you never know, maybe there's a chance. Well, maybe there's a chance that Javi Baez gets a contract with the Mets, right? I mean, there's a lot of baseball left to be played. There's a long way to go in the season. Maybe he can flip the script in a way like he did yesterday. And I'll tell you, when he was rounding third base, when you have a little action, plus 600 when it's down to the final out, Gary DiSarcina at third base might not have been waving him home, but me on my couch, I was like Willie Randolph back in the day. I was waving him home. Come on home, baby. Come on home.
Look at you.
Yes.
Look at you making a little coin on that game yesterday.
Well, it's a win-win for me. As I said to you earlier, Chris, I know I'm going to be here with you in the morning, so if he does not come through, that's going to be content for the show. And if he does come through, that's content as well, and content with a couple of more bucks in the old account.
You really are a degenerate, though. I mean, at this point in the season, you're betting on the matinee of a doubleheader with the Mets and the Marlins.
13 people in the audience. I'll tell you, as soon as Lindor got on, I didn't have my phone with me downstairs. I was like Baez rounding third. I was running up the stairs in the basement, getting that phone, signing in, making sure the location was right. Get that money in, and look, I'm still digging out of the hole that the net season created in the old payroll, great. The bank account there. But yesterday was a nice little addition.
Well, good for you. Good for you, and good for Javi Baez.
And now we can go look to bankroll that on the Giants season here before too long. Wins and losses. Come on, the over/under. It's right there for the taking. Only 7. Come on.
It feels like they're just baiting you to take the over on that one, right?
It does feel like it. You know what happens when it's too easy to come. There's a reason why it looks too easy.
Oh, man. Could you imagine the Giants if they don't get 7 wins? Oh. If they don't get 7 wins, G, could you imagine what's going to happen?
Well, look, the season won't be a whole lot of fun, but the offseason will be because there'll be more than enough changes going there, right? I mean, to the quarterback and the GM. I mean, there's going to be – if you only get to 7 wins, if that's even in a conversation, I think you have – if you don't get 7 wins, forget it. I mean, I think you could get more than 7 wins and still be having those – like at 9-8, right? Is 9-8 more enough progress this year, considering all that's riding on it, considering all the money you spent the last couple of seasons? But yeah, if you got to if 7 is even in the conversation, ooh, boy.
7 and 10. Oh, yeah.
Well, look, I mean, the over/under for the Knicks last year was completely wrong, right?
Yes.
They completely exceeded that.
Yeah, because the over/under was like, what, 22 and a half, and they had, what, 41 wins, something like that? Yeah, so, I mean, hopefully that'll be the case for the Giants. But I got to say, G, I don't know any team that ends up being a good team when you have a really bad offensive line. I mean, those teams are few and far in between. Like, I don't know teams that have good seasons with bad offensive lines. And the Giants' offensive line was really bad last year. As a matter of fact, in 2020, they had the worst pass block win rate of any team in the NFL. And they didn't do anything in the preseason to give us any confidence that thing got improved. Like, none. So, I don't know, man. I don't know who's riding in on that white horse to save the day when it comes to that offensive line. But, I mean, they got to get things shaped up in a hurry. Otherwise, this thing could get away from the Giants quick.
Yeah, so, great veteran quarterbacks can sometimes get by with subpar offensive line play because they know the ways to kind of buy themselves a little bit extra time. Daniel Jones is not on that list, right? I mean,
no.
The younger quarterback is always going to struggle the more obstacles you put there, and that certainly that could be a huge
That's an obstacle when you drop back and you're going to get hit in less than 3 seconds. That would constitute an obstacle.
Thanks for listening to the DiPietro, Canty, and Rothenberg podcast.
I don't wake up at 4 a.m. to wear a swim shirt.
Looking for more access to the show? Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at DCR on ESPN.
Let's go back to the phones. Matt is in Queens. Matt, what's going on, pal?
Good morning, guys. First thing, just a comment on Javi Baez and a quick Jets question. I think the whole Javi Baez thing is a little bit overblown. I don't think the guy really – I know I'm in the minority in this. I don't expect you to agree. That's fine. I don't think anything he said was really all that crazy. He doesn't like to be booed or whatever it is. The thumbs down thing, I mean, come on, man. We're in New York. Is toughen up a little bit. Somebody puts their thumb down. I mean, don't cry over it. I mean, you booed. He said he doesn't like it. They put their thumb down. They put his thumb down. Big deal. That's number one. And number two, the media, which is understandable because your guy's job, your job is to entertain and inform. You run with the story. It does draw interest to the radio station. So you guys are doing your job, which is understandable. So I just want to say something about.
Well, I would say, Matt, you're saying for New Yorkers or Met fans to toughen up. I would say to the players to toughen up. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if you don't like getting booed, don't strike out. Don't have terrible seasons like the Mets have had, like Lindor has had. And then you won't get booed. And you see how quickly it flips, right? Like They got booed to start the game. They got cheered to end the game. It's not deep. It's not like people are sitting in the stands saying, has his performance dropped off to the level that I am now going to voice my displeasure by booing it's like caveman in the stand. Boo! He struck out. Boo! It's not the brightest thing in the world, but I would say if you're saying that the fans need to toughen up, I would say the players who are making millions of dollars need to toughen up as well.
Yeah, the players have to understand that the fans are going to be fickle. Like when you play well, they're going to show you the love. When you don't play well, they're going to boo you. That's what happens across all sports in all cities, but especially in New York. And there's a different kind of scrutiny. There's a different type of intensity. And so I understand where Matt is coming from in terms of the coverage of this, but don't try to make it out like the media is blowing this out of proportion. Keep it in mind, like Sandy Alderson issued a statement after Javi Baez had his Zoom press conference.
Almost immediately.
Like he came out with a statement after that saying that this is not something that we tolerate, this is not something that we're going to stand for. And then Steve Cohen actually addressed it and said that the players touched the third rail. That's not the media doing that. That's the organization doing that. That's what the organization is saying about how they feel about what the players did in their comments about the fans. So don't make it like the media is blowing this out of proportion. That's what the guys that sign the checks of the players are saying. They're saying that those guys were in the wrong for doing that. So, again, I go back to this. The players are far enough in their careers where they should know better. Javi Baez and Francisco Lindor, they might not have been exposed to this degree of criticism or to hear the boo birds at this level. But, I mean, you got to know when you're not playing well, especially after, the Mets had led the division for 3 months, when this team has this kind of collapse in the second half, the fans are going to let you know about it.
And it's a big enough issue with both in ownership, the GM, the front offices, the team, that they were actually able to convince the players, whether they believe it or not, to go out there and apologize. So I don't think that they had any actual change of opinion, but the front office, the team convinced them enough that, yeah, you have to go put a better look on this because this cannot stand as it is.
Yeah, but I don't understand why people are taking shots at the media, G.
Look, we're an easy target,
It's not like
right?
the media made Javi Baez say what he said about the thumbs down gesture. I mean, but you got guys coming after media members. I mean, you got Marcus Stroman doing what he's doing on Twitter, saying it's facts, bro. The media is blowing things out of proportion. This ain't on the media. The media ain't make y'all do the thumbs down thing. The media didn't make Javi Baez say what he said about the gesture. They didn't do that. The media didn't make the team issue a statement. The media didn't make the owner come out and have something to say. That's not on the media.
Well, I will say this. I think that the level of the media focusing on this, clearly, and we kind of talked about this earlier, Met fans showed you that they were not nearly as offended as some of us are. Now, I think that they should have been offended because they were basically telling you to go scratch. I think it's probably a little bit more vulgar than that, but I'll use that term here. So, I could understand why you should have been, but based on the reaction yesterday, I think it's pretty clear that Met fans are willing to move on from this pretty quickly as long as these guys perform to a certain degree, which they've not done consistently so far this year.
Well, as long as they go out there and they play with energy, right? For a lot of the second half, the Mets have looked absolutely lifeless. And so to see this team actually have some hustle, actually give some effort, and then have the results be what they were yesterday, I think it allows them to kind of, move past, what's happened the 48 hours prior. And as a player in that clubhouse, I got to imagine that's a huge sigh of relief, being able to kind of put the focus back on baseball as opposed to having to answer for the gestures that certain guys on the team have been doing over the past several weeks. So, listen, I'm actually happy for Javi Baez, Francisco Lindor, and Kevin Pillar that they did get the results that they were looking for yesterday. But I will also say that, fans, even though they cheered them after that win after the first game, this is not something that fans are going to forget. And the minute that this team, goes through another bad stretch, plays another, has another bonehead player or makes another bonehead comments, fans are going to go back to this as well, and that's just going to kind of add to it. So, this is something that can be forgiven in the short term, but I don't think it's something that's going to be forgotten, especially when it comes to Francisco Lindor.
Yeah, well, look, if it can flip as quickly as it did yesterday, it can flip right quickly, just as quickly the other way. So If they go out there and look lifeless and lose a bunch of games in a row, this is going to pop up again. All right, let's move to the Yankees a little bit because in case you're just getting rolling on this Wednesday, Yankees go out. Very similar game to the night before. Early lead, starting pitcher gives it up. Yankees aren't able to score enough runs to kind of make up for it. 5 double plays last night, and they lose to the Angels, a 4th straight loss. And you say, Chris, even though I would think that the level of concern is up a little bit from yesterday, it's still not rising to a level where you're going to worry about it.
No, I'm not worried about it. I'm not panicked. Now, if we're talking about this team losing a couple of more games, like if they lose tonight with Garrett Cole on the mound, then maybe my panic meter goes up a little bit. But, last night, it's not like the Yankees couldn't put the bat on the ball. They had 10 hits. There's a lot of hard hit balls that ended up resulting in double plays for the Angels. They hit into 5 double plays, and then Taillon didn't have his best stuff. Taillon wasn't great. He has that cement mixer that he throws, that curveball in the 4th inning, and Jared Walsh does some damage on it that ends up being a 3-run bomb, and then he throws that fastball middle to Gosselin in the 5th inning that ends up scoring a couple of runs. So those 2 pitches from Taillon ultimately were his undoing, and it just happened to be the night that the Yankees offense couldn't bail out the pitching. Now, I thought that Stanton had a chance there in that 8th inning because he took that pitch for a ride from Guerra. I thought that was going to go over the fence in left field, but it ends up being a sac fly, and that kind of ended the Yankees' threat because Petrichka comes in and he strikes out Urshela and Luke Voit, and when you had runners on 2nd and 3rd. So that ends it in the 8th, and then Gardner in the 7th hits into that double play and that ends up taking away another scoring opportunity. So it feels like they had chances in that game, but the offense couldn't come through with the big hit. And that hasn't been what we've seen from the offense by and large for the last, 5 or 6 weeks. So I'm thinking that this 4-game losing streak is more of an outlier. But I think that, the next couple of games will tell the tale.
1 for 10 with runners in scoring position and 5 grounded into 5 double plays. Tyone goes 4 2/3, gives up 6 runs, so not the best night for the Yankees by far. Let's go to Mel is in Brooklyn. Mel, welcome into DCR. Mel?
Come on, Mel. Come on, Mel.
Apparently not.
Killing me, Mel.
Happen. He is not rounding third and heading for home like Javi Baez.
No, he's not showing up.
No, that's not a good sign.
Not at all.
All right, 1-800-919-ESPN is the telephone number, 1-800-919-3776. In terms of Tyone, I know we mentioned it earlier, level of concern for him. Did not really pitch the last 2 years, and now is up at 130 innings. Last time out against the A's, he got the big lead, right? I think it was a 6-0 lead and kind of let that slip away. But then last night got a lead again, not as big a lead. And once he got to that, the 4th inning, could not really get out of it and just seemed like – I think he was a pitch away. I think he was a strike away from getting out of it. But was not able to do it. And you kind of have to wonder, like, between both Tyone and Kluber, they had very similar stories coming into this year, right? Had not pitched a lot, and you wondered how that would impact them moving forward. The fact that Kluber has now missed as much time as he is, I think I might feel better about him down the stretch of the season being an important factor rather than Tyone, who I know it's only 2 starts, might be a little bit out of gas. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. You're going to have every opportunity to see, whether or not Tyone is going to be able to pitch himself out of this little slump that he's in last couple of starts. But, I mean, that was his first loss in his last 16 starts. So I'm not ready to panic with him just yet. But I think that the Yankees, even though they're right in the middle of this wild card race, I think they're going to have to figure out what they're going to do behind Garrett Cole when it comes to starting pitching once they get to the postseason. So I just, I don't love that Tyone is struggling at this point in the year, but I can't also ignore how good he's been for the majority of this season. So, it's just one of those things, G, that I got to take a wait-and-see approach. As far as Kluber is concerned, I mean, he looked good for the first 3 innings that he pitched the day before, but it was, again, that 4th inning that kind of, unraveled right there, got away from him, and it ends up being a bad outing. But I'm not worried about the Yankees pitching overall. I think the pitching will be good. The thing that I would be panicked about, or that I would worry about, is if the lineup wasn't able to produce. So, like, if this offense wasn't scoring runs, then I would be panicked. But I don't think this offense, is going to struggle the way that it did in the first half of this season. That's not what they've shown me in the second half, particularly after the trade deadline.
Yeah, and the Rays win again. I mean, they never lose, so that actually is good news for the Yankees, because while the division, it's more distance between you and the Rays there, I think that's pretty much gone. The bigger concern is the Red Sox coming up in the rearview mirror, and Boston loses again last night. And then, I don't know if you saw this, Chris, but during the game, Xander Bogaerts gets a base hit in the game. He's rounding first and doing some sort of hand signal to the dugout, and then all of a sudden Alex Cora is giving him a little hand signal saying, "Come here," and it turns out he has tested positive. I'm not sure if he's tested positive or is it contact tracing or whatnot, but he is now going on the COVID list, so that's a big loss for the Red Sox.
Oh, that's a huge loss for the Red Sox, and he's having a monster year, so him being out of the lineup, that's a big piece. Like, the Red Sox don't have the luxury of being able to give away any games. So, yeah, him not being available for them, that's only one of those things that's going to help the Yankees. So if we can continue to kind of maintain our standing and not give any ground to them, then you feel good about it, right? Because ultimately this is going to come down to being able to have the wild card game at home and being able to line up your pitching. And if you have enough of a cushion between yourself and Boston and Oakland, then that's going to end up being your reality. So fingers crossed that ends up being the case for the Yankees. And if it is, you got to like their chances of being able to get into a real postseason series.
And it's just crazy how fast that this has flipped, right? From the 13-game winning streak where you were at 4 back of the Rays, and you're thinking to yourself, all right, maybe it's a little doubtful.
I said it last week. I thought we had a chance. I'm like, I'm sitting there looking at it now.
It's 8.
That's not going to happen.
And you know, I think that the winning streak for a lot of us was, hey, this is a resetting of the season, right? Like this is now after the trade deadline, we've seen some more life in the team. They're playing like the team that we thought that they were going to be the entire year, especially coming into the season. And now what I think what this 4-game losing streak does is makes you kind of wonder, maybe it wasn't that reset. Maybe that was the outlier, and the Yankee team that we've watched for the majority of this season, you know, ups and downs and back and forths, that this is going to be the entire way the rest of the year. What I would say is the Yankees not only have to be in that wild card game, clearly, while the division I think is gone, they have to be hosting that wild. Anything less than that to me is going to be a disaster. They have to be at least hosting that game.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want that wild card game to be in Fenway Park. Like, you don't want it to be there. Am I worried about them going out to Oakland and getting the win? Not necessarily. But, I mean, you would like to have that game in the friendly confines of Yankee Stadium and have the home crowd behind you as you're going into a kind of a do-or-die situation. Like, you want to be able to also line up your pitching because you want to have Garrett Cole on the mound. I mean, he's the guy that you trust the most with the ball. So, like, all of those things are, you know, why we'll be paying so much attention to what happens in the month of September and making sure the Yankees can kind of maintain their position. Because if you're talking about them having to scrap and scrape and not being able to have Garrett Cole on the mound or not being in Yankee Stadium, then I think that would raise the anxiety level of the entire fan base.
Jack is in D.C. Jack, go, my man.
What's going on, guys? Love the show.
Thanks, man. What's up?
So, yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the Yankees. I'm not that concerned with the loss last night. I think, Cole's going to shove tonight, and the Yankees only play 2 playoff teams the rest of the year, so I'm very confident we can get that second wild card or first wild card. But I'm a little concerned about Taillon. Not that he's a bad pitcher, because I think he's a very good pitcher, but just the amount of innings he's throwing. I think we might have to skip a start or 2 just to give him a break, because we see him, I don't know if he's hitting a wall or what, but we have to make sure he's ready for the playoffs. And I know skipping a start is a hard thing to do when you are fighting for a wild card game, but, I'd rather Taillon be right heading into a wild card game than Taillon not be right and be guaranteed, or him being right and maybe not making it. I would say that would be better, because I'd rather him, because if he's not right, we have no chance.
Well, I wouldn't say no chance, but yeah, I understand what you're saying. And he has not really pitched any significant innings since 2018. That was the last year, and then he missed a couple of years as a result of the arm injury. So, yeah, that has to be something, the Yankees are like the guy from that old media clip where the guy's spinning the plates on the sticks, right? Like a baseball team, you're always kind of constantly doing 1,000 things at once, 1,000 balls in the air. Yeah. And Taillon, one of those ones that you thought you'd kind of got worked out, and okay, we don't have to focus so much on him. I don't know that you have to focus so much on him, but yeah, last 2 starts, I would be lying to you if I said that they were not concerning, because much like the Yankees here, the last 4 games have kind of gone back to some of the same storylines that we saw earlier this year. He's kind of pitching like he pitched earlier in the year, too.
Yeah, it's not what you want. Like, you don't want to see that. Like, you want players to be at their best as you move closer to the playoffs. But, yeah, you do have to worry about where he's at in terms of the amount of work that he's had and the number of innings pitched this season, given that he hadn't had a whole lot of work the last couple of years. So, I don't think it's a situation where the Yankees have the luxury of being able to skip him a start or 2 just because you recognize how important every single game is. And, you do want Taillon to be, kind of right once we get to the playoffs, but you also have to make sure that you get to the playoffs. And so I think that's the balancing act that Brian Cashman and Aaron Boone have to do down the stretch in order to put themselves in position to be able to get that first wild card and to host that playoff game at home.
Thanks for listening to the DiPietro, Canty, and Rothenberg podcast.
I have nothing left.
Hear more of DiPietro, Canty, and Rothenberg live weekday mornings from 5 to 8 a.m. on 98.7 ESPN in New York, the ESPN app, the TuneIn app, or on your smart speaker.
Hey, Alexa, play ESPN New York 98.7.